anyway, yeah, when she left him, he was still on the bed, unable to cry out for mercy. So, yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a grim tale, but there you go. This is what I'm about to jump on board here is a little bit like an open letter, if you like, to the United States. Because the United States has always, in my lifetime, has always been the reference point of all that is good in the world, and has always been the market leader of what we need, who we need to follow, if you like.
Yes.
And so if we reflect a little bit, just before I was born in like the 50s, the American way of life was all apple pie.
Yeah.
Man goes to work, small white fence around the house, comes back home, and he's got his 2 kids. Then we go up to the 60s, the 60s and 70s. We had Elvis Presley. We had the images of a man on the moon.
Yeah.
In 69. 70s was when television really started to expand, and so Kojak was on the go, and Starsky and Hutch, and all these Hollywood was high on the agenda. And the American economy, apart from the 70s, which had high inflation.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was at school, when they started with the petrodollar.
Yeah.
And they started to buy hand over fist oil from the Saudis.
Yeah.
And at school, I used to hear stories about the Saudis having so much money, that a guy from Saudi Arabia was driving up the M1 in a Rolls Royce. His car ran out of petrol, so he went off and bought another Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
That sort of story, basically it was, that the US was a place of dreams.
Yeah.
However, all good things must come to an end. And this is a message to the US. The world is watching you. The world is watching you.
Yeah.
So what do we get now? With communication being a lot more open, we see the US economy under an awful lot of stress.
Yeah.
34 trillion with a T dollars in debt.
Yeah.
$1 trillion every 100 days, going further into debt. Even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has alerted the US as to its spending. And all of a sudden, the US is not as attractive as it once was.
Yeah.
Internally, we see how the justice system has been hijacked.
Yeah.
To appear to be, like akin to an African nation.
Yeah.
One of the really, really African nations with a bad reputation.
Yeah.
More recently, the United States has threatened to cash in all the Russian assets, $10 billion worth of assets, to convert that into money and send it to Ukraine, which is just stealing Russian assets, And so on the outside, we're on the outside looking into this is what I see as a mere mortal. You can bet your bottom dollar that the leaders of other countries
Mm.
who are also on the outside looking in
Yeah.
can see a bigger picture than what I can.
Mm.
And so I asked myself,
Yeah.
if the US should stop trying to be the top dog
Mm.
because it's embarrassing itself,
Mm.
and be in second or third place for the time being
Yeah.
until it gets its shit together.
Yeah.
Because the US is not in a very good place at the moment, and the more that the politicians
Mm.
think that they are the best people in the world,
Mm.
the worse it's getting in the US, I'm afraid. We've got China,
Mm.
Russia,
Yeah.
the BRICS nations, basically India,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of them critical these days. They're critical. In the
Mm.
old days, they would never be,
No.
because in the old days you had to have to do deals, international
Mm.
deals. You had to have the dollar, the great
Yeah.
American dollar.
Yeah.
So everybody was keeping tight-lipped about what they really felt about the US.
Yeah.
These days, countries are doing deals between themselves,
Yeah.
not without the American dollar, and they are
Mm.
more freer to say what they like about the US.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid they do. They're starting to do that.
Well.
And so I don't know if you remember, we did a podcast about the global
Yeah.
village
Yeah.
and about one of the neighbors making a lot of noise.
Mm.
But that was the US,
Yeah.
and they're making the wrong noises both internally and externally.
Yeah.
We had this debacle with Ukraine.
Mm.
We've got this current debacle
Yeah.
about the Middle East,
Yeah.
and soon to have another debacle with the South China Seas.
Yeah.
And if the US isn't careful, it's going to end up being a lot less
Mm.
than second or third place in this world. We know that the US has a large market to sell to.
Mm. Yeah.
There's
Mm.
300 million people to sell to.
Mm.
But China got its place in the world by having an industrial base.
Yeah.
And China in the 70s, everybody used to make fun of the Chinese
Mm.
because they said that their products were not a good quality, and they'd sell cheaply at
Yeah.
any quality, and and then inevitably things that you bought that were Chinese, fell to pieces.
Mm.
But that was in the old days. These
Yeah.
days, what we use these days are the vast majority of good electronic
Mm.
goods are Chinese.
Well.
You know?
Yeah. Well.
So China is setting itself, if it can
Mm.
organize its internal economic
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Basically, it's that the US, it needs to, as they say in Brazil, bash a bola.
Yeah.
Lower the tone a little bit, and
Mm.
be a little bit more humble on the world stage, so that it can get through this. Because at the moment they're not doing absolutely anything good for
No.
the American population.
No.
Off you go on
Yeah.
that one.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I'm sure you've got to say.
oh God, yeah. Yeah. We're talking economics, sociology, history, and yeah, all the good stuff. Yeah, it's a. I mean, yeah, coming to mind, yes, there's a book that's actually been written called The Fourth Turning, which I've not actually read myself, so I don't like quoting it, but I've read a lot about it, where it splits into 80-year cycles and 20 years within that. And it's, as you said, the 60s, well, from the end of World War II, 40s, 50s, 60s, was a good time. Even going into the 70s was a good time, happy time. Not for everyone. There were some people that were outside the American dream, as it were, directly. Yeah. But as you said, we watched the TV programs starting in the 60s, the comedies, the dramas, the police series, and they did show an underbelly that was in the US as well. Yeah, you're not shocked by it. Probably a bit stylized, very, very definite. The character in it was very definite, but that's drama. You can't say it's all black and white like that. Well, but it was a certainly interesting time, and we liked it. We enjoyed it. It was the mecca for entertainment. I mean, yeah, you look around my room here, I've got Star Wars things, and things like that. I grew up with this. I won't say I grew up the American dream, because even in the 70s, we didn't really want to be American. We weren't really baseball culture. But yeah, we dressed like Americans. I've still got a hat that's 40 years old, probably about New York, which was bought in Southend, like city where I come from. I still wear it here. I still wear it about town. Yeah. My wife says, "Oh, are you going to get rid of that old thing?" No, I'm not. It's not. So yeah, we grew up with it a little bit. It was a dream. It was everything. A lot of the music, entertainment. Obviously, come from an English-speaking country, so we probably had a lot of the influences come in. It was a time. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, let's remember the US just at the end of the 70s was going through a traumatic time as well. Let's remember that, and in came a revamp, as it were, in the form of some people say is the greatest president ever, Reagan. I don't know. I can't comment. Yeah. I think he stabilized. I think you can say he stabilized things. He made some mistakes. Yeah. Even yeah, good ally with the UK, but still managed to annoy us a little bit on a few things. But probably had to do it. Would make a decision. Could make a decision, and could explain his decisions himself in press conferences. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he could reach out to you. So yeah, it was a time. It was a good time, and yeah, you could almost be a teacher or work in a gas station and afford a reasonably sized house. Not like on the American series where you can be a shoe salesman and married with children, sort of go home to a house that size. But it was a reasonably good life. Whether that was all artificial or not, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to speak to some neutral economists about that. But yeah, it's fun. Then sort of mid-80s, probably coming into the 90s, it started to get a bit rocky for various different reasons. And again, yeah, that's where you did start to see things going a bit strange, just when some of our strange wars started that questionable. I mean, we had wars before. Proxy wars are not new. Well, actually, we're direct, but we had proxy wars in the 50s and the 60s, but there was American involvement on the ground, Vietnam, Korea. Obviously, in the Middle East, there were wars happening in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, it just woke up in 1987 again this morning. Yeah, Russia was this big threat. But yeah, you're quite right. Now, the other side of it all is, I'm going to say this: empires come and go. Now, the US has never been an empire, not in our traditional sense. The world has changed. What happened before? You used to have the Greek Empire. There have been other Abyssinian Empire. There have been other empires come and go. The Roman Empire was notable, probably. That rose up, then got to a point where it couldn't sustain itself, so went down, split itself into two. Yeah. Had the British Empire, which has been the biggest empire the world has ever known. Good and bad about that. I'm not going to sit here as a British guy and say I apologise for absolutely everything. It's like anything else. There was some things that Britain did good for the world. Yeah. And we can sit down and probably do another podcast about that and trade blows on it almost. Yeah, I mean, there were things before that. So and empires grow. The American empire, or the American economy, is actually growing quite a quick time. Let's remember that. from, if you like, the end of the 1800s up to now. So it's actually done this and gone up very quickly, and it's coming down very quickly. The last time that probably, don't forget, when America was in the ascendance, the British Empire was going down, descendant. And because we have had a reasonably good, relationship with each other, it was accepted. Yeah. We're basically the same people. We can object to that in some ways, but we're basically the same. The Americans and the British are basically the same in some quarters that are acceptable. I mean, I won't say I can do business all day long with an American. But I've worked with Americans. I've always found them reasonably good people, very direct, able to talk themselves in and out of a situation a lot of the time. But okay. But now with what's happening between the US and China, it's very different. You've got two totally different cultures, two different ideologies in many ways, and they're not friendly. And that is a worrying thing. When you're talking about debt, who is the US's biggest debtor? It's China.
No, creditor.
Creditor. Yeah, creditor. Yeah, and I knew I got something wrong there. Creditor. Yeah, I double checked myself. Creditor, the bigger creditor. Mm. Yeah, it's China, and it's, I can't remember the latest figure, to be quite honest. You caught me there, but it's frightening.
Yeah.
Now, there's an historian stroke economist called Niall Ferguson who's written some length about this, and he's got a name for it, but he says it's going to be interesting what happens, because the US isn't going to be able to, isn't going to be willing to pay this debt to China.
That's right.
What happens?
So it's going to give up. It's going to give up its assets.
Yeah.
Public buildings, ports, airports, land. It's going to give up its assets.
Which within it,
or go to war.
I was going to say, there's two options. There's a big resistance against giving up assets and land by many of the states in the US on this. Yeah. I mean, let's also hand it to the Chinese. They're good business people. I mean,
no, vicious.
Vicious.
Oh yeah.
If we're talking vicious, I don't think any major empire or institution around the world can actually claim that they haven't been. But yeah, it's the way they do things. They think long term. So if we're talking vicious, have they implanted things? Yes, they've done the long walk in business wise. They're the biggest capitalists in the world, biggest communist country, and the biggest capitalist at the same time. Very weird combination, or is it? At the heart of every communist, there's probably a capitalist trying to get out.
Well, you could argue that they've got it about right, where they control the population, and their financial situation. We can never be sure, because the Chinese are always saying that their economy is strong, and the West is saying their economy is weak.
Again,
I know that they had problems with Evergrande, the construction company. That was supported by the federal government of China.
Yeah. Yes.
But I don't know. The true, because the Chinese don't say, basically.
No.
They don't say how their economy is. So.
Well, yeah, it's difficult to know. I mean, you see reports. I mean, I've got a channel here on smart TV, Bloomberg. Okay, whether you may think or not think of Mr. Bloomberg, he is actually quite a good news organisation. It gives you a good snapshot of business. And yeah, in the mornings they sometimes have from Asia. I don't know how they analyse the Chinese economy, but there they do raise problems, and yeah, normally it's quite negative. This is happening, that's happening, but is China about to fold? I mean, yeah, we're talking about the US here. The US isn't in. The US can probably sneeze, yeah, get a little bit of a flu and still come out of it. They have done in the past, like I said, in the 70s, they managed it, but something happened which actually turned it around. In their case, Reagan.
Petrodollar.
Yeah,
petrodollar.
Yeah.
The petrodollar. When people have to do any transaction, international transaction in the world, you had to convert your currency into dollars before you converted it. So the Americans, it was on a win-win for the Americans, because you paid if you go to a bureau de change to change currencies, before you change from your I don't know, from your reais to your euros, you have to change it to dollars first, and then you're going to lose like 5-6% just on them two transactions alone.
I mean,
so you know, the Americans were earning money hands over fist. Like I said, these days countries are starting to do deals between themselves, and without having to change to the dollar.
Yeah, which is good in some ways, and you know, self-sufficiency and everything else, I support.
Not for the Americans, for the Americans, because nobody needs to buy the dollar.
Exactly.
They'll use the dollar. The two countries will use the dollar as a reference point.
Yeah.
So they say, how many rubles do you get for your dollar?
Yeah.
And they say, I get 1,000. How many reais do you get for your dollar? We get 5.
Yeah.
So 1 real is equal to 200 rubles.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's how we do it. You know, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Without having to actually go through the physical buying the dollar and selling the dollar.
Yeah. So it's I mean, when I was in Bolivia, you could get dollars everywhere. Some people wouldn't even touch the local currency, the Bolivar, I think it is. But you go to a bank, you were drawing out dollars. Obviously, I'm converting from pounds to dollars. I mean, we're living in a country that's part of the BRICS. There's been some talk about us coming up with our own international currency to counteract the dollar. I mean, that's going to take some kicking off anyway, quite how that does it. I mean, there are other options as well. You've got cryptocurrencies. I mean, I heard, well, I did actually, I saw a talk by Nigel Farage yesterday on a video online. And I don't worship the guy. You know, he's been influential in British politics. He's interesting to listen to. But he's saying, well, if you want some security, get cryptocurrencies. I know there's some problems. Is there? Yeah. It's not something that I would want to risk any money in. I mean, any money you deal is a risk. Yeah. But again, it's an alternative outside the dollar in effect. There are options now that are coming. So it's not the almighty US it is. And so maybe you're quite right. Maybe they should be thinking about taking a step back, letting China, if you like, do its thing, fail drastically at some point in the next 25 years. Because that's, the Chinese do long-term planning. We think 5 years, the Chinese think 50. They do their long march. We do our quick step.
If you look at it, Matt, as I don't know if you follow cycling very much. In the velodrome. Yeah. In the velodrome, and they have teams. They have teams of 5 riders competing against other teams, and so and these teams of 5 riders. You got the bloke at the back. He'll go to the front and pull everybody along. Yeah. And then after a couple of laps, another bloke at the back will go to the front and pull everyone along again. Yeah. And I think that the countries in the world need to do that sort of thing. Yeah. Where you get somebody who's strong should do that, and the others friendly, amicably would. It's called that sport's called devil take the hindmost. Yeah. And so they should tuck in behind and just charge their batteries again, charge the batteries, sort themselves out, and then when their moment arrives, they should go in the front again. And but it should all be done. It's no use trying to stick at the front and say, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, because eventually you're going to go you're going to come in last.
Yeah, I mean, we're all. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it kind of counteracts what's going on. Make America great again. But again, that doesn't mean be the best in the world. It just means make us sufficient, make us good, make us be proud to be who we are.
That's right.
We're losing British pride. You and me are considered dinosaurs because we have a certain pride in being British. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah.
I'm going to near. We had St. George's Day this week. Was I interested in it? Yes, I was. I think jingoistic and everything else. It's a day of fun, and that's what it should have been. Yeah.
Funnily enough, more people here were celebrating St. George's Day than in the UK celebrating St. George's Day.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Well, it's a day of celebration here with Cumberland as well, isn't it? The religion here as well. St. George is seen as their saint. It's a I mean, it's feeling good about yourself as well. Margaret Thatcher did actually work on making people feel good about themselves. Okay, we've got minors, and again, it's another divisive thing. She tried to promote Britain, and yes, she was upset about her famous statement was, a woman goes to a supermarket, buys a basket full of things, wonders why her son's unemployed, but they're all foreign produce. It's all foreign, produce. It was difficult to buy, British at the time. Even apples or other things, if I remember. Yeah, it was all imported. I mean, okay, there's pride. If you can manufacture things internally, now, I mean, that's clothes. I mean, if you can produce your own food and everything else, if you can be self-sufficient, that's great. If you can trade, that's good as well. That's mutual benefit to the world.
That's one of the failures of the US. They outsourced the manufacturing, so they weren't producing anything.
Yeah,
and they just relied on cheap Chinese. Funnily enough, cheap Chinese products.
Fair play to the Chinese. They, as you said, aggressive, but they stepped in and they filled a gap, as it were. They found their market and they went for it. But
anyway, resolving this, what is going to be your message? My open message to the US was to lower the tone a little bit. What would be your message to the US?
My message to the US is tread very carefully. You're not a good look at the moment. Just really, and try not to have a civil war.
Well, that's up to them internally. Internal stuff. I don't really want to meddle too much. Although I did mention about the justice system. But I mean, that's going to be put interpretation for the rest of the world to see.
This is all part of it. And you're saying what is the look that the US has and how they're influencing us. And that's what you were saying at the beginning. We grew up with influence of 60s, 70s and 80s with the US. I love films from the 1980s, as you know, and the 70s as well, to a point. I think the 70s was probably one of the pinnacles of filmmaking from the US, experimental or otherwise. But it's again, they're not selling themselves. You watch a film now, it's all negative about US internally, and it's wrong as well. It's people's interpretation of the US as a dreadful society. It's not perfect. We come from a perfect country called the UK. Yeah, we try and spread the good word in Brazil. But
the promised land.
The promised land.